Let's look at how to graph piecewise functions on a Texas Instrument calculator. Now, as always, I have a TI-84 plus CE, and this is one area where if you have an older calculator, there is going to be a huge difference, and it's going to be a lot more difficult. So I am going to hit that as well, but let's start with the newer and easier way with this calculator. Now, I've already got a function here so that we can use that to get started. And as always, I'm already in y equals to get the graph going. So with the newer calculator, you can type this all at once using the math menu. There's some fantastic stuff under that math menu. So let's go ahead and hit math, and I'm going to scroll down till I see piecewise, which on mine at least is option B. So let's go ahead and hit piecewise, and you'll notice I get a little menu. The first thing it asks me for is how many pieces do I have? Here I have 2, so I'm going to go ahead and enter that as 2 pieces. So let's hit left to go down, and again you can kind of mess around with that until you've got the right number of pieces, and then let's hit enter and enter. At which point this is going to give me the setup I need. Now, it's got a little semicolon instead of that if, but that semicolon is going to act like the if. So I'm going to put this on the left side and this on the right side. So I've got x plus 3, and then let's hit right to get to the other side. Where do I get those inequality buttons? I'm going to use the test menu, which is second math. So let's hit second and then math, which gives me this test menu. And you can see all of our equal and inequality signs underneath there. So here it's a less than sign, that's option 5, so x less than 0. And then hopping down to my second piece, I've got x subtract 7, and then x, go back to second math for my test menu, greater than or equal to, which is option 4, and then 0. Again, I always tell my students, take a moment, make sure you've typed everything in correctly, because of course if I mistype it, my calculator is not going to give this to me correctly. That does look correct though, so let's hit graph. There's my first piece, and here comes my second piece. Now, one word of caution, when we actually graph these, we will want to have either an open or closed circle as we go from one piece to the other. Technically, the calculator has put those in, but they're really hard to see because there's just one place. You can sort of see them if you go to table. If I hit second table, here we are switching at 0, so you'll notice the only value we have here is -7, which basically means that the value is at this lower point rather than at the upper point. So technically you can see it, but it's really hard to see. I usually tell students to plan to put in the open and closed circles by hand, where again, if it's strictly less than or strictly greater than, that will be my open circle, and if it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, in other words, we have that or equal to, that's when I'm going to have my filled in closed circle. Now, again, a lot of the calculators do not have this piecewise option, especially the older ones, but even some of the newer ones. So if your calculator does not have that, we're going to have to do a bit more work. So let's go back to y equals and clear that out. And what I'm going to do instead is graph this as 2 lines. Technically you can do it as 1. I find it easier as 2, where y1 is the top piece and y2 is the bottom piece. I'm going to put parentheses around the left-hand side and parentheses around the right-hand side. And instead of putting an if, I'm going to put in a division sign. So it's going to look like that. And similarly, here is going to be my second piece. So let's graph that. I've got x plus 3 divided by x. Again, I've got to go to that second math for my inequalities. I need less than, which is 5, 0 in parentheses. And then the second one, I've got x subtract 7 in parentheses, divided by x, go back to my second test menu, greater than or equal to, which is option 4, 0. So again, it is a little bit more of a pain, and you do need those parentheses. If you do not put those parentheses in, it is not going to graph this correctly. And then let's go ahead and hit graph. Now the main difference, because I've entered this as 2 lines, we will see 2 different colors. So the blue line is the first piece, the red line is the second piece. And now if we go to table, we are going to see obviously values for both lines, but we're also going to see error messages. I've got it set up as division so that we don't have other numbers throwing it off. So I'm interpreting the error message to mean that's where that piece does not exist, so that we only have one piece at a time. Particularly for students with my older calculators that have to type it in this way, I tell them to always remember to check this using a vertical line test. This is a single function. Even if I've entered it in 2 pieces, it's still one function. It should pass a vertical line test. So if I graph something and it doesn't pass a vertical line test, then I've probably mistyped something. So that is something I use to encourage my students to check to see if they've graphed it the way we think it should be graphed. Let's try now a 3-piece. So I've got one written out. Now again, if you've got this 3-piece, I'm going to type it in pretty much exactly how it looks. So I'm already in y equals. Let's go to our math menu. And I'm going to go up and around to get to that piecewise. It's a little bit quicker. And this time I've got 3 pieces. And let's go. So here I've got 1 and x. Again, I'm going to be using the test menu for all of these inequalities. And I'm typing in slowly to make sure that I'm typing all of this in correctly, because it is very easy to accidentally mistype. Less than or equal to 3. And then finally 3 if x is strictly greater than 3. Again, always double check, make sure I've typed everything in correctly. That looks good. Let's hit graph. Now again, I can't necessarily see where I've got open or closed circles. For this one, I would have open circles on the leftmost and rightmost piece, whereas this middle piece at 0 and 3, I would have closed circles. So again, that is one thing that is hard to see with the calculator, but I can hopefully see the rest of that without too much difficulty. Now here's where the big difference in the calculators come in. If you don't have this piecewise and you have to type it in at 3 pieces, this is where it gets very annoying. The top piece and the bottom piece aren't too bad. Again, I'm going to put parentheses around the function, parentheses around the inequality, and then a division sign, basically division sign instead of the if. It's this middle piece that's going to give me difficulty, because unfortunately with the older calculators, if you type in a 3-part inequality like that, the calculator will not interpret it correctly. So I am first going to break that into 2 inequalities with an and. Basically, I've got 2 x's and an and. And then finally, I'm going to take this left piece and flip it around so that the x comes first. Again, with the older calculators, if you do not do that, the calculator will not interpret it correctly. So for the middle piece, I'm going to put 2, divide it by, and then all of that in one big set of parentheses. Do not put parentheses around the end. We want one big set of parentheses for the entire thing. If you put more parentheses in, again, the calculator is not going to interpret this correctly. So let's type this in, and let's start with the easier pieces. It is strictly less than 0. I'm going to skip that second piece just for the moment. Second math is greater than 3. So now let's go back to that middle piece. I've got the 2. Again, it's going to be one big set of parentheses where the x comes first. So x is greater than or equal to 0. Now to get the and, I'm going to hit second math to get to that test menu that we have been at for a while. And then I'm going to go right to logic. So that is that second submenu, and the very first thing you can see under there is and. So let's go ahead and select and. Again, I do not want parentheses around and. If you put parentheses around the and, it is not going to do this correctly. Again, I always write it out like this, and then make sure that what I have on the calculator looks exactly the same. And now let's hit graph. Again, I'm going to have 3 different colors because I've used 3 different lines, but otherwise this is going to look exactly the same as how I did it previously. So again, if you have the newer calculator with that piecewise, it makes a huge difference. It's so much easier, but you can still do it if you have the older calculators. However, it is significantly more difficult to do that.